That's the first rule of improv. Pay attention and then say yes and then add to it. And so what's the next step? And that's all improv is. But a leader who learns to yes and. So when somebody brings you a complaint, an idea, a question, your first instinct should be yes. I hear you. That is a problem. That is an idea. I'm not saying whether we're going to use it or not, but yes, I want to hear more about it. And that's what the and is. The yes is start with agreement instead of right away telling people no. And then and means add to the conversation. One of the biggest ways to make people feel like they matter is to make them feel heard. So if I come up to you as my boss and I share an idea, even if ultimately we don't decide to do that idea, the fact that you listened to me and we just dissected it or we explored it a little bit, I feel like my input matters. And that's what Yes And is all about.
Welcome to Return on Empathy, a podcast brought to you by the Empathy Collective, a community where leaders come together to navigate change without losing their humanity. Whether you are a plant manager trying to humanize the factory floor, a small business owner wanting to build a strong culture that lasts, or a corporate executive striving to prevent burnout in your team, you belong in this community. Laughter isn't something we usually associate with leadership. For many of us, work has been about being polished, professional, and productive, sometimes at the expense of being human. We are taught to have the right answers, to move quickly, to stay composed. And somewhere along the way, listening deeply, showing curiosity, or admitting we don't know gets pushed aside. But what if being a good leader doesn't start with having the perfect words? What if it starts with presence, with listening, with saying yes to the moment in front of us? Today's conversation invites us to rethink what leading with empathy looks like at work, and it might surprise you. My guest is Jon Colby, a keynote speaker, improv educator, one of MSN.com's top 10 speakers to follow in 2025, and recipient of the Real Leaders Impact Award. With nearly 3 decades of experience blending improv, education, and leadership development, Jon has helped organizations around the world communicate better, lead more humanly, and reconnect with the people they work alongside every day. This is Return on Empathy. Welcome to the show, Jon. It's so good to have you here. I've been looking forward to this conversation ever since I saw you at the AME conference back in October. You emceed the event, and you were by far the most engaging MC I've ever experienced. So kudos. I've been to a lot of conferences in my lifetime.
I think that's a big deal from somebody who sits around and watches a lot of these things. Appreciate it.
And that's why I wanted you to come onto this podcast, because I felt like you bring a really unique skill set to the table with your experience working with leaders, and also as such a strong communicator, and with your background in improv. It's such an eclectic mix of things. And I think you can bring a lot to the topic of workplace empathy, given your experience. And also just given my experience watching you engage a large audience. I mean, especially after we've all eaten a huge lunch and we're kind of in a coma, you somehow got people to stand up, do a fun exercise, and get excited about what was next, which was super cool. I actually remember one of my favorite exercises you did at the conference was the house exercise, and we all had to like build a house with someone else, and then we had to find a resident to come in our
Yeah.
house. I
Yeah.
can't remember the rules that you laid out exactly, but I do remember you saying that you had done this exercise with a team, and they had asked you to identify 3 people that they planned to promote. Like, if they wanted to see if you could get it right. Like, we're
Yeah.
thinking about promoting 3 people. Can you guess who they are? You conducted this exercise to see how people respond during chaos, and you guessed all 3 people right.
Now, to be fair, there was one other. I played 2 games, and this one and another one, and you can see who has natural leadership skills, and naturally it's like nurturing skills and empathy skills, and it all mixes together. Like some people just look out for themselves, and other people want to be successful, but they know we're going to be more successful when we're all working together and we're all taken care of. And so some of those people that would go out of their way to make sure other people found a home, so to speak, those I'm like, oh, it becomes apparent who are those people that you want in charge, and it's the people who take care of each other.
Okay, so can you talk a little bit about that exercise? Because the details are escaping me. So how does it really bring out those leadership traits in people?
So for those of you who haven't seen, I won't explain all the rules, but basically you have two people are making like two people are doing this to make a house together, and the third person comes in. And so I can say one thing, and the people that live in the house still have to go find another house. The other one, the people that are making the house leave, but the house stays put. And the other one, everybody moves. So somebody could be a resident, now they become part of the house. Well, you see some people that very quickly will grab somebody and make sure they have their stuff. It's like basically groups of three. I have our two people and our person in our house. We're good. You have other people who kind of panic and just watch the commotion go around. You have some people who are kind of looking for what to do, but then also just assessing the situation. And so the leaders to me are the ones that will make the house and then call for somebody to come over, or even if they have somebody in their house, they will point, said, hey, they need somebody over there. There's only Debbie, Ron needs somebody. They're like, they're bringing everybody together and making sure everybody has somebody. I also joke around when I say that nurturing thing. You'll see people who are very comfortable grab arms and just pull people around and like move people around. It's just like, I'm not afraid to roll up my sleeves and get stuff done. And it's still in a respectful way, but it's just fun to watch people make sure everybody's got what they need. And honestly, if we all worked at places where everybody felt supported, we would work better, right? I mean, there's all the research in the world that says if you feel valued and supported, you'll be good at your job.
I just love how that simple exercise was such a strong predictor of future leaders. Let's go back to your background in improv. So what did your career journey look like?
Well, I mean, in high school, I did plays. And then in college, I went to school to be a theater and speech teacher. And then I later added video production. So I was going to school for those things. But just in a college show I was in, the director noticed me, like somebody was late to rehearsal one day and noticed me kind of like making up stuff for somebody who wasn't coming in, and he was just cracking up. It turns out they were stuck in traffic. They weren't even at rehearsal. And finally the director stopped. He goes, I just want to see how long you would keep going. You should do improv. And I was 20 at the time. I didn't even know what improv was. And so I'm like, all right. So I was gonna say Googled it, but this is in 1998, so I didn't have Google yet. So I looked it up and found out there was a place in Indianapolis called Comedy Sports. And I just happened to go. I called my friend Dave. I'm like, hey, will you go to a show with me? We went to a show, and then they announced, so like, hey, and for the first time ever, we are holding auditions in 2 weeks. And I felt like it was just like a divine intervention that I happened to go when they're announcing their first ever audition. So I went to auditions and I got in and I started doing improv in 98. And then a few years later, I started getting asked through Comedy Sports to do workshops for corporate. Back then, it was more just team building. But then it just kind of, as I was teaching, this is always just my side hustle. And I started getting bigger and bigger opportunities. And then, as anybody who loves improv and wants to make it a career, I moved to Chicago. And I did it up there. And I met some people. A guy saw me in a show and asked me if I wanted to do some bigger stuff. So I was flying around the country doing some yes and training for like sales employees and stuff. And I started doing that for a couple of years, and I moved back to Indy, and I was still teaching, and I started doing it more on the side. And a friend of mine uh, needed a company to build a website for one of his students. He taught at the Art Institute of Indianapolis, and somebody needed to build a business website. So JonColby.com's first iteration was built for free by a college student, and it turned into people started finding it and suggesting it to other people. And then finally in 2019, I was making more money in my side hustle than I was in my teaching job. And so I made the switch, and here I am today. My entire life has been dumb luck or God's intervention. That's what I tell people all the time.
I mean, there's certainly a luck component to everyone's. I mean, stuff that happens like this, you have to think there's luck involved. But I've talked a lot on my podcast about listening to signals from the universe, and I feel like you were very attuned to that.
Yeah.
You listened to the teacher who said, "You should try improv." I mean, any 20-year-old kid could be like, whatever, I don't even know what that is. I'm just gonna continue on with my life." You listened, and then you actually proactively went out and sought a show, and then another message, opportunity for you to audition. So, yeah, I just feel like you were tuning into these signs that you needed to go down this path. You didn't know what the outcome was going to be.
And do you hear what you're saying? You're basically saying, "I can listen and yes, and that's literally all I'm doing. Literally, because that's the first rule of improv. Pay attention and then say yes, and then add to it. And so what's the next step? And that's all improv is. So thank you for telling me I'm good at improv.
That's fantastic. Yes, and I love it. It's interesting that you got pulled into supporting leaders, supporting sales teams. Clearly, there's a connection between improv and the workplace environment and building better leaders. I'm not an improv expert. I always associate it with humor and people being funny and you're going to a comedy show. How does what you learn in improv connect with uh, creating better leaders or improving communication? Where's the connection there?
Yeah, so I mean, when we talk about leaders too, I mean, we can talk about CEOs, managers, all the way down to like parents or somebody running a book club, somebody who's running it. The leader's job is to remind everybody why they're there and why they matter, right? So often I think leaders feel like their job is to listen and then tell people what they can and can't do. When you think about being a parent, like, no, because I said so. That's just kind of like the generic terms we use, right? And so our brain gets into the mode when we're in a leader position to decide yes or no. And then other than that, our leader job is to fix things, right? They think leaders are supposed to do fix things. I'm like, no, most people don't need stuff fixed for them. Like, for example, if somebody has a complaint, they just want to complain, right? Honestly, like I tell married people all the time, like, if your spouse complains and then you try and offer advice, you're just starting a fight because they're not asking for your help, right? I joke around, I say unsolicited advice should never be given to a spouse. They're not asking you because they think you're smart. They're just complaining because it's convenient. You live together and you have to talk to each other for the rest of your lives anyway. So you might as well talk about the bad stuff and the good stuff, right? But a leader who learns to yes and. So when somebody brings you a complaint, an idea, a question, your first instinct should be yes. I hear you. That is a problem. That is an idea. I'm not saying whether we're going to use it or not, but yes, I want to hear more about it. And that's what the and is. The yes is start with agreement instead of right away telling people no. And then and means add to the conversation. Forbes did this study saying the number one reason people quit their jobs is because they don't feel valued. So whether it's their manager, their team, if they don't feel like they matter, they leave, right? And now talk to communication experts. So one of the biggest ways to make people feel like they matter is to make them feel heard. So if I come up to you as my boss and I share an idea, even if ultimately we don't decide to do that idea, the fact that you listened to me and we just dissected it or we explored it a little bit, I feel like my input matters. And that's all we want, whether you're a manager talking to the regional director or you're a 6-year-old talking to your dad. You just want to feel like your input matters. And that's what yes and is all about. And then the second rule, I won't go into all of the rules I like to talk about, but the second one is no mistakes. And what that basically means, you can't mess up. Companies that have leadership who are too risk averse, you're shutting down ideas, you're shutting down potential growth because of the risk. And I'm not saying that we should just be risky all the time, but if I don't have a manager who will even consider something risky or something different, not even risky, but just something different, eventually I'm going to stop sharing my ideas and we're not going to grow if we don't get new ideas. So in improv, they say there are no mistakes, there are opportunities. So even if something goes wrong, the question is, what did we learn from it? So that we don't make that mistake again, but also maybe we can still grow with this idea. It's just a matter of building the confidence to share my idea, even if it might not work, to speak up and be the contrarian in the conversation instead of just going along with what everybody else, because I might be the one person who sees the flaw in this. But if I don't have a team that I feel like is going to support me, I'm not going to speak up and share my thoughts. So if you build a yes and no mistakes team, these people are going to have ideas like crazy. They're going to run through walls and they're going to support each other. And that's on the improv stage, that's in the corporate world, and that's in the classroom with little kids.
That makes a lot of sense, and it reminds me a lot of the work that Dr. Amy Edmondson does on psychological safety at Harvard. She published a book called The Right Kind of Wrong. I'm just thinking about, as you're talking about no mistakes, she talks about intelligent failure
Mhm.
and creating that environment where you are allowing for intelligent failure. So you're not just making a mistake and then repeating it over and over without learning from that, right?
Yeah. Have you heard this? The word fail is an acronym. It stands for first attempt in learning.
Hmm. That's
Long as
wonderful.
as long as it's our first attempt in learning and we learn something from it, we're good. I joke around, I'm like, now if we sail, second attempt in learning, and then tail, third attempt, at some point we need to learn something from it, right? So, but as long as we're learning and growing, fail's not a bad thing.
So is that acronym something that flies around the improv circles? Like, is the concept of failure, does that exist in improv? Can you actually fail at improv?
Well, there's a famous interview between Tina Fey and I can't remember the interviewer, some intellectual. And so they start doing a scene and then he tells her she's wrong. She's acting like their husband and wife. And he goes, "You're not my wife. I don't know you." And she goes, "Now hold on. Now that's not a failure, but you're breaking one of the rules." And because one of the rules is to accept. So if I in the beginning of the scene I call you my wife, we go along with it and we're good. The only way you can really mess up in improv is if you deny the other person's reality. Because let's be honest, improv is just a bunch of adults playing pretend in front of people sitting in seats facing in the same direction. They paid money to watch grown adults play pretend, right? So, but as long as we all agree to pretend, we're good. But if you have that one kid who won't play pretend, it's like, no, that's not true. No, that's not real. Then all of a sudden we can't create anything because we're too busy knocking each other's stuff down. But when somebody makes a mistake and they say the grass is blue instead of the grass is green, or they say they name somebody that wasn't a president, or they say somebody who's a football player instead of a basketball player. Well, all of a sudden now LeBron James is a quarterback. He's not a basketball player anymore, and we're all just going to accept it. If somebody goes, actually, LeBron James plays basketball, that's the only kind of mistake you can really make.
If you're loving this conversation with Jon Colby, this is exactly the type of stuff we'll be diving into in our brand new online community, the Empathy Collective, this summer when we launch. If you want to become a founding member and be one of the first contributors to this community, go to our website, theempathycollective.com, and sign up for the waitlist now. We cannot wait to see you there. That is fascinating.
Yeah.
That actually reminds me a lot of, a conversation that I overheard between one of the neighbor kids and my five-year-old, who loves to pretend. So he's like his improv skills are top notch. And the neighbor kid, he's like a couple years older. I overheard him tell my son, "You don't need to just pretend all the time." So he totally just failed the improv.
Right.
He just burst his bubble, but it's fascinating. That's I love that concept, how you can literally just free wheel and
Yeah.
not have to worry about making factual mistakes or factual errors, and that the person who's in the wrong is actually the one who raises a hand and kind of bursts the bubble and says, "Okay, guys, that's actually according to Wikipedia, this is
Yeah,
not."
exactly, exactly. Nobody wants that guy. And what's funny, I love that you're talking about kids because I've got a to-do list. My to-do list for 2026 is in front of me, and number 2 on my list is write a kid's book on yes and, because I've looked it up and it doesn't exist. And I have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, and all the time they will pretend, and then all of a sudden one of them goes, "No, you can't do that." I'm like, "Well, hold on. Why is everything else like, why are you allowed to be married to a stuffed animal bear and you can be in Disney World, but that ride isn't there?" Like, how where why is all of a sudden that the line? Everything's good, but like that's too far. Well, no.
Yeah. Who
I'm
made up
trying to
those rules?
Yeah, yeah, I'm trying to teach kids not to live behind these fake rules. So, we'll see if it works.
I wonder if we're picking it up from adults. I love that you're gonna write a book on it and let me know when it comes out because I will definitely buy it and read it to my children. So let's go back to the concept. I know you talked a little bit in the beginning about improv and deep listening, and I remember you telling me about a story, where I think you were leading an all staff meeting for warehouse employees who were predominantly Spanish speaking. And you were infusing the concept of improv and deep listening into that situation, and you had some really good outcomes come out of that meeting. Elaborate on what exercises you did with the staff and how did it make a difference for them?
So, yeah, I think the story I think you're talking about, I was in Chicago and I got hired to do something where typically the front office staff, which is predominantly English speaking, would do team building and leadership stuff, but they normally didn't include the warehouse because those people were Spanish speaking. And I suggested, I'm like, number one, I can bring a translator to involve them. And number two, I can play several games like that house game that we played. I can play those kinds of games and you don't need to speak a language. Like, I mean, there's all these examples of bringing international little kids together, and guess what? They just play together and they figure it out. But we get so stuck on words. We want to use words for everything, where words are only 7% of communication, where 38% is tone and 55% is nonverbal. So I'm like, we can do a lot of stuff nonverbally, right? So we play these different games where you partner up, or ones where you're supposed to go to certain areas, and I would explain it in English and my friend Luis would explain it in Spanish. And then once we would do it, we would make sure they were simple words or even hand signals, so everybody in the room was on the same page and they would play it. And at the end, I think we did a 2-hour workshop where there were only 2 games that you had to partner up with somebody that spoke your own language. The rest of the majority of the time you could play with anybody. And at the end of the workshop, we got some feedback, and one of the guys said it in Spanish, and then Luis translated it for us all. And the guy mentioned that he'd worked at the company for several years in the warehouse. He'd been there several years, and he said, "Today was the first day I felt like I mattered. Like at first, I felt like part of the team." And again, it's because he was included. His voice mattered, and his difference didn't keep him excluded. Didn't keep him from being excluded. So my goal, and I mean, I've worked with kids with profound disabilities to workshops where there were several languages spoken. So we had to do everything in nonverbal games for an hour. So there are ways to make it all work, but like our goal is always to make it so everybody matters. And so when I'm creating those, like, it from the empathy podcast, my whole goal is what do they need? And so I have to build something thinking from their point of view, and how would I learn without words, and how could I interact? And then going into empathy even more, maybe you haven't guessed this, but I am an extrovert. I like talking. I like playing games. I like being around people. And so when I do these workshops, even if it's all English speaking professionals, I know that if I'm working with accountants or IT or engineers, I'm going to have a lot of people who are not as extroverted as I am. So how do I create an interactive experience that is comfortable for them? It's meet them where they are, no matter what the circumstance.
Yeah, and as an introvert myself, I fully understand. In fact, I remember when you were at the conference, at the AME conference, which, manufacturing audience, you have a lot of engineers and plant managers. So I think you were making the assumption that there were some introverts in the
Yep.
audience. And,
Yep.
I think you actually said at one point on stage, you were like, yeah, I had someone pull me aside and say, "Hey, John, every time you tell us to stand up and do an exercise, I'm like, I don't want to do this. I hate this. And then after it's done, I actually love it and I'm happy I did it."
Yeah.
You said something along those lines that someone pulled you aside and told you that because we
Yeah.
introverts tend to kind of roll our eyes when we have to stand up and, like, I don't know, engage with other people and do awkward
Yeah.
things with strangers.
You were at that conference. Very rarely experienced this, but one point I said, "All right, everybody stand up." And like there was an audible groan at one. I'm like, "Oh, come on." So I know I'm pushing people, and I don't like to say I'm pushing them out of their comfort zone. I'm pushing them to create a larger comfort zone,
Yeah.
because a big part of the conference is the networking and the connecting, and a lot of the introverts aren't going to do that on their own. They're going to sit in sessions. They're going to maybe walk by the vendors, but a lot of them only stop to talk to vendors if they're profoundly introverted, and they're not really going to talk to anybody. They're going to sit with whoever they came with, and they're not going to create much of a bigger circle. But when I play a game, like I have everybody raise their hand and find a partner, you high five, now you have your partner. So I help you find your partner. I give you a topic to talk about, and I give you an improv rule to follow. So while we're playing the game, your brain is focused on the game at hand and then sharing your opinion on food or what do you like to do for fun. So I'm giving you enough to do so you don't really get a chance to be anxious because you're just focused on your own stuff. But on accident, you learned about somebody else and you found out they love the same food you do, or they've also been on that same thing, or they also hated visiting that landmark or whatever. So you start making these connections. And then what's so fun is if I'm running a keynote, we'll play these games. When it's done, I'll watch people like we're going to take a break now. They'll go over to the person they just partnered with to continue the conversation. I'm like, look, you just made a friend. And so my goal is to help make those introverted people's experience better, not just in the workshop, but in the entire event.
You really succeeded at it, 'cause I do remember that exercise with the high fives, and it was a way to kind of find similarities with strangers. And I almost wish we would just do this with people on the street, like high five
Yep.
someone and be like, "Hey," because we're so divided right now, and we don't wanna talk to someone who looks different or is of a different viewpoint politically or whatever. And I feel like if we just high five people randomly, there's so much we could learn from people. Like when I did the exercise at AME, I remember I was in a group of 3 and there was a really quiet Asian gentleman who lived in the US, but he was born in Asia. And we found out that we had both lived in the Netherlands. So I would have never guessed that this Asian man living in the US had spent time in the Netherlands. But because we high fived each other and we were looking for commonalities, that's what
Yep.
came up. So
Yep.
I think, yeah, that just creating more human connection through
Yes.
the improv exercises that you're doing is just, it's so easy yet so profound.
Yeah.
Obviously, this was in the context of a conference where you were helping us engage in these activities. For leaders who, especially those who are introverted or don't feel like they're good at, doing off the cuff, funny things, or they don't feel like they're super creative. What is one really simple practice that a leader could do with individuals on their team or maybe the team as a whole to help people feel more valued and engaged in the workplace? Is there a tip that you could share?
Yeah. The biggest thing I've learned, and actually I think I heard somebody at that conference say it, and it's become my new favorite phrase. And the phrase is interested people are interesting to people. And so if you want to build a relationship, ask questions of other people because what's funny is it helps everybody because introverts don't really like to talk as much. They don't like feeling like they're on the spot. So have a couple of pre-planned questions in your head that you can ask other people. And then people like being asked questions. And so that starts the conversation. So if as an introvert, I ask you a question, I take the pressure off myself to talk, but I give you it, but you're also an introvert, but I told you what to talk about. So it makes it a little bit easier for you. And so I met a guy at that conference. This wasn't on stage. He just said it in passing to me. He said, I found interested people are interesting to people. And he's in sales. And he said, a couple of years ago, somebody taught me the power of asking questions. Cause I talk about that in one of my talks. And he said, I made it a goal at a conference. It was a 2-day conference wherever he was at. He's like, I didn't talk about myself at all. If somebody would ask me a question, I would answer it very quickly and then turn around and ask a question back. And whenever I would meet somebody, I would ask a question. I would just start away right away trying to learn about other people. He said, I walked away with more business cards at that event that I ever have because people found me interesting because I got to know them and got to learn them. And so as leaders, stop talking so much. Start asking questions. When you give information to your team, stop saying, are there any questions? Because everybody's going to say no. Instead, say, what questions do you have? Or even stronger than that, say, I would like to hear 3 or 4 thoughts or questions before we wrap up the meeting. And that's not a question. That's a statement saying, I'm the leader. I want to hear from 3 or 4 of you. And then so people are going to be quiet and awkward for a few seconds. And they're going to realize we're not going anywhere until we get some questions. And so the questions that people normally have but don't want to ask, Why have the question? We're not going anywhere. So now all of a sudden, I'm helping us move forward and I'm starting the conversation. And once a couple people start asking questions, now all of a sudden, this goes from a meeting to a conversation. And then one last piece of advice, you asked for one, I'm giving it's still questions though, but
Bonus.
ask a question of group and then tell them and turn to a partner and share their answer. Because I
Mm.
said the number one thing people want is to feel valued, and you do that through making them feel heard. So if I have 15 people, 16 people in a meeting and I ask a question and let everybody turn in groups of 2 or 3 and answer that question, now in that one moment, every single person in the room got to feel heard. And so they all feel valued. They felt like this is no longer a meeting. It's a chance for them to take in, but also to share. So I could give out new information and saying, "Hey, okay, so we talked about this new initiative. I want to know what are your first thoughts. Maybe you're excited about it. Maybe you see something that could be a problem and you're concerned about it. Turn to a partner and share it out. And so then they all get a chance to talk for a couple minutes. Now come together and they go, okay, now, and there's two ways you can do it. You can either say, now share with me some of those things that you heard, or a little trick. If you have some introverts who never speak up in front of the group, you could say, hey, I want somebody to share out what you just talked about in your group, but here's the rule. You can only tell me what you heard from your partner. So sometimes you have an introvert and an extrovert partnered up. Well, the extrovert will say it to their introverted partner, then they'll say it out loud again to the group. We still aren't ever hearing from the introvert. This way, you together, now the extrovert's actually sharing out what the introvert said. So you're getting some of those more different perspectives that you normally don't hear. It's all questions. It's all about questions.
I love that. It reminds me a lot of Edgar Schein's Humble Inquiry. I mean, that was published like, I don't know, 1950s. So
Yeah.
it's not a new concept, but I think we tend to lose sight of the importance of just asking good questions and
Yeah.
not just, making statements and just talking at people all the time.
Yeah. It's Carnegie's How to Make Friends and Influence People, right? It's just get other people talking.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about. And I love, by the way, that you're like a human Google. Whenever I talk about something like that reminds me, and you have the source ready, like that book reminds me of that conversation. Like your brain is impressive.
Well, thank you. I researched this topic. It's like food to me, nourishment. I'm constantly reading things on the topic of workplace empathy. And so I've read a lot of books in my
I
time.
love it. I love it.
But yeah, so I'm super excited, John. I mean, this has been a really interesting dialogue, but I am going to do something special with you that I'm trying for the first time this year with my podcast guests. What I want to do with my guests is I want to try to create more interconnectivity between all of you. I've interviewed so many fascinating people like you, and it's my dream to bring all of you together in a room one day because I think you would love each other and you would have so much to talk about, and just the collective intelligence and wisdom in the room would be just mind blowing.
Yeah.
But until that point, I thought this little exercise of passing the empathy torch would be a good way to create some connection between you, the next guest, and the next guest, etc.
Uh-huh.
So the concept is that you would either leave an empathy challenge or just ask an open ended question for the next guest to respond to. And it would be a little bit improv like because they wouldn't see this question in the script. So I would ask
Oh,
it
no.
live on the fly and then they'd have to respond to it without having thought about it first.
Yeah.
And then the idea is we start snowballing this empathy torch and passing it on after 4 or 5 torches have been passed. I'll start to likely see a common thread between the responses or the challenges, and it might merit a larger article in my Change Conversations newsletter, where I would bring you all together. And maybe it would also mean bringing some of you together for a future episode as, like a panel discussion style episode if
Yeah.
if I see some common themes. So
Yeah.
anyway, I just wanted to try it out for this year and see what happens. And I figured starting with you would be great since you're the improv guy.
So I can give an empathy challenge that the next person then has to do? That's my question, or is it just a question that they're going to answer in the moment?
It could be either one. So it could be a challenge that you would like them to do, or it could just be an open-ended question, whichever one you'd like. I'm giving you the option.
So my challenge that I would give to somebody else is something that actually I think I learned at church a long time ago. Somebody said, when you're hearing about somebody going through something challenging, stop trying to fix it right away. and spend some time thinking about what it's like for them. And so the most drastic version of the challenge is literally recreate their experience for yourself. So if somebody is dealing with financial challenges, force yourself, and you get to choose how long, force yourself to not spend money for a certain amount of time. Maybe you can't spend money this whole upcoming weekend. You can't spend any. What would you do? We both have young kids. So what would you do with your kids? How would you spend a weekend only eating what you have in the house? And you can't let somebody else take you out to dinner either, right? So find a way to do that. Or the empathy challenge, it could like that you don't have to necessarily recreate for yourself, but if somebody's struggling in a certain relationship, before you give them some advice, literally take some time and say, what would my life look like if I had to deal with that kind of boss? Think about a project that you're working on what if you were being micromanaged the way your friends talk about being micromanaged, and then kind of take it on yourself, and then going back to that person and then asking for their thoughts. Because now that had a chance to either experience it or to really think about it, if you don't have any questions, you didn't dive deep enough into it yourself, and then it can kind of become more of an empathetic conversation because we're both trying to explore the answers together instead of being the person on the outside that's just telling other people what to do. I think that's where we are struggling as a world right now. It's a whole bunch of people going, well, they just need to do this. Well, if they just didn't do this, it's their own fault because of this. Or I don't know why I'm like, because you're not taking time to consider all of the other factors that have led to this. And if you really take the time, nobody's struggling with an easy answer. These are complex problems I don't think enough of us take the time to consider. So that's my challenge. If they want to deal with that, good luck, because it's hard.
That's something that I'll definitely reflect on too, because what I want to do with this empathy torch is also try the challenge myself. So the guest will be responsible to do it, but maybe co-create the experience together with the guest so we can share our experiences together or answer the question if it was a question that was posed. So
Yeah.
I like that one. I don't think we take the time to do this as much as we think we do
Yeah.
because we are so quick to jump into problem solving. And this applies to work life as well as personal.
Yeah. Oh, what's funny is when I got the question, my brain immediately went to way more personal situations than business I mean, I know it's present in both, but I think in a personal, you tell everybody else who they should date and how they should parent and all that stuff. But when you're doing it, all of
Yeah.
a sudden it's a whole lot harder. So yeah, yeah,
Yep, that's a great example.
yeah, yeah.
Well, thank you for humoring me and passing the empathy torch to our next guest. I look forward to seeing how they take on this challenge, and I'll definitely circle back with you once I know what they decide to do. And yeah, thank you for being with me today and sharing all of your insights on improv and leadership and empathy. You bring such a unique perspective, and it was really such a fun conversation.
Well, thanks so much. I can't wait for this mastermind retreat of a bunch of empathetic people whenever that happens too.
If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts. And if you would like to learn more about the Empathy Collective, check out our website, theempathycollective.com. Life is too short. Let's take care of each other at work so that together we can make this world a better place.